The Penguins are in Beantown looking for a bounce back tonight against the Bruins. Hunter and I are going to discuss that and more in this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, Penguins fans, to the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym4wet. Joined live to tape from the Garden by Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. We thank you for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get a $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So, like I said, Hunter joins us in this episode live from the Garden, and that is where the Penguins are taking on arguably the best team in the National Hockey League tonight in the Boston Bruins. They are an absolute wagon once again. So, this is a big bounce back night for the Penguins. They lost a game they probably should have won against the Washington Capitals earlier this week. It's going to be a huge test to see where they sit against an actual legitimate contender tonight in the Boston Bruins. So, Hunter, what are we looking for tonight? And what do the Penguins need to do to come out of Boston with 2 points?
I'm honestly looking for a true road game from the Penguins, kind of similar to what the Capitals did for the second and third periods against the Penguins just the other night, where, they're skyhooking the puck out, they're blocking a lot of shots, but I would want to see more offense from the Penguins in that situation. But you're going up against a Bruins team. They've won 4 in a row after losing 4 in a row. They continue to prove me and a few other people wrong, because I didn't think the Bruins were going to be that good this year, especially after losing both David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron. But when you have Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak doing the things that they're doing, they're going to be a tough out, especially also with Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman being 2 of the best goalies in the league. And I think that's the best tandem in the league at this point. For the Penguins to win this game, I think they're really going to have to win this special teams battle. Sure, most of the game is played at 5-on-5, but you look at the Bruins special teams this year, Pat. They're 4th in the league in power play percentage at 27.5%. They're 2nd in the league in penalty kill at almost 86%, 85.9% to be exact. The Penguins special teams units are going to be tested very much in this game. And if the Penguins do get some power play opportunities in this one, they're going to have to find a way to make them count against one of the best penalty killing units in the league. And then vice versa, with the Penguins PK being top 10 in the league, going up against a power play that has so many weapons, that's going to be a big test as well. This could be a really fun special teams battle between these two teams tonight.
If you're the Penguins tonight, you got to stay out of the box, plain and simple.
Yes.
This is an absolutely lethal power play. And you just look at some of the players that are leading the way for Boston right now. David Pastrnak has 50 points, 22 goals to go along with it. Brad Marchand still humming along. As much as you may hate him, he's a hell of a hockey player. 13 goals, 33 points. Charlie Coyle, 13 goals, 27 points. JVR having himself a little bit of a renaissance with 25 points. And it's a very well-balanced team. Their top guys do a ton of the scoring, but they get contributions up and down the lineup. They've got a ton of guys in double-digit points, including former Penguin Danton Heinen, who this is one of those things where it doesn't seem like you can get as mad as you want about the Penguins not having him anymore, but this is a guy who it seems like no matter where he goes, it doesn't work, but it works in Boston for whatever reason.
It's always worked there for him, to be honest. It's actually kind of funny. And you said it best when it comes to the Bruins. They can spread out the wealth still pretty solidly, because if you look at their top 6, they can put David Pastrnak on their top right wing and also have him next to Pavel Zacha and Morgan Geekie. And then they can have Brad Marchand on their second line with Charlie Coyle, who has been rock solid for the Bruins this year. I did not think he was going to have 13 goals, 27 points in his first 36 games. I've always thought Charlie Coyle is a pretty good player. I didn't think he was almost a point per game player good in the NHL. But their top 6 is loaded. Jake DeBrusk. Remember, once upon a time, just a couple of years ago, he requested a trade from the Bruins that quickly went out the window. He's playing some of his best hockey these last couple of years. This is a very good top six. The forward group overall is a bit better than I thought it was going to be this year. Have to give a lot of credit to Jim Montgomery. He's one of the best coaches in the league right now. What he's done since taking over for Bruce Cassidy, who I honestly thought he got treated a little unfairly by the Bruins. And he went to Vegas, won the Stanley Cup with them, but they hit a home run with Montgomery. He has them playing lights out almost every single night. And for also this game against the Bruins, this has been a house of horrors for the Penguins over the last 8 to 10 years. It has been very rare when they go into the Garden and they win that game. I mean, heck, they were swept by the Bruins last year, one overtime loss. That was the game where the Penguins had a 3-goal lead. I believe it was multiple times in Pittsburgh. They lost that game, and then they lose the Winter Classic, and then they lose another game very late in regulation against the Bruins. They played them very tough in all 3 games, but they weren't able to get the result. We're going to have to see if that changes in this one. I know recently the Penguins also, they've had games where the star players haven't played as well. That has to change in this one. You are going to need your star players to be your best players if you want to go out there and beat one of the best teams in hockey.
Right. And I look at this matchup in the top 6, and I do have to give the advantage to the Penguins ever so slightly, but this is about as close as it gets, as we've seen in a long time, outside of the true contenders, where you look at this team and go, their top 6 is unquestionably better than the Penguins. And then you hinted at it a little bit. Again, 2 of the best goalies in the league on this roster in Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. Ullmark with a 918 and 18 starts. Jeremy Swayman also 18 starts, 928 save percentage. So they're picking up right where they left off last year as the single best tandem in the National Hockey League. So it doesn't really matter which one's going to get the nod tonight, but we know who is going to get the nod for the Penguins, and that's Alex Nedeljkovic. That came out this morning, and I think this is the right decision.
It's going to be Swayman. He was the first one off the ice for the Bruins at their morning skate, though Montgomery didn't fully announce it. We'll have to see, but if I had to guess, it's going to be Swayman. The Bruins, they can start either one of these 2. They're both 2 of the best goalies in the league, but you can continue with Nedeljkovic. No surprise there, but go ahead.
Right. It's no surprise, and he's earned more starts as the years continued. And again, I don't want to fully blame the Capitals' loss on Tristan Jarry, but this is what we talked about last episode, where you have a goalie now as your backup who you don't have to wince when you give him time. If Tristan Jarry needs a few days to get it figured out, get his head back on straight, or just recover, you have Alex Nedeljkovic right there, who is a more than capable 1B at this point. So it's another opportunity for Mike Sullivan to look at his goaltending room and say, okay, if and when we get to the postseason, who are we going to lean on?
In that situation, I would guess they would start with Jarry in the playoffs, but that's a bridge we can cross when it potentially comes to it if the Penguins do make the playoffs at the end of this year. But I agree with you overall. Nedeljkovic, he played really well in relief for Jarry when he had his first rough start in about a month and a half to 2 months earlier this week. He had a 933 save percentage. He kept the Penguins in that game. The goal that he gave up was not his fault at all. Outside of that Ottawa start about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, he's been a rock all season. We all know how good he was against the Islanders. I think he was the biggest reason why the Penguins won that game. He's 17th in the league right now in goals saved above expected with 6.8. He has a 924 save percentage, 2.42 goals against average. Not many teams in the league can say that their backup goaltender has numbers like that. The Penguins are one of the few teams that can. And it's maybe a little bold, if you even want to call that they're starting Nedeljkovic against one of the best teams in the league. But when it really comes down to it, you can also make an argument that it's not, just because he's been amazing for the Penguins this season, and he's earned more starts to be that 1B to Jarry's 1A, or honestly, at times he could be the 1A and Jarry can be the 1B. At best, they're splitting up the starts, which I think is perfect for both goalies.
You really do have to split starts, especially with Tristan Jarry. And that's not a knock on him. That's really just become the reality of the modern day.
That's how you got to do it.
It's become the reality of the modern day NHL. Having as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike Tomlin, likes to say about running backs, having a bell cow would be nice that can play the lion's share of your starts. That is very rare anymore in the National Hockey League. You need to have a goalie who can start 50-ish games and then another goalie who can start 30-ish games in his place so that they're healthy going into the postseason. So we have that tonight's game, 7:00 at the Garden. For those of us who aren't in Boston like Hunter and are not going to the game, you can catch it tonight on ESPN. So you don't got to go hitting the high seas for tonight's game. Another thing that is going to happen tonight, and we'll talk about it a little bit in our last segment, is we're going to find out, I believe it's the first 32 players named to the NHL All-Star game. So we'll give a quick couple takes on who we think from the Penguins should make it. But that is going to do it for this first segment. When we come back, we got to talk about some roster construction news that came out today about a player that signed a PTO with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. But first, we have to tell you about one of today's sponsors, and that is Sleeper. We're almost at the halfway mark of the NHL season, and Penguins fans, it's been an up and down year so far. They're in the playoff hunt, which is where we expected them to be. But regardless of where the Penguins are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. So all I know is this week, I don't know who I would take, but it would probably be the guy I gave the Warrior helmet to, and that is Jake Gensel, because he is having himself a monster season so far. And I love this app because it's daily fantasy. It's not season long. I don't have to keep up to dates with every matchup every week, every single day. So I can play hockey. I can play NFL, NBA, MLB, college football, you name it on Sleeper. I can talk with my friends in the app and connect with other fans. And all you have to do is pick studs like Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Jake Gensel, and whether or not they will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. To win $100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Penguins fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. We're back on another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp, joined as always by the one and only, the illustrious, live to tape from the Garden, Hunter Hodes. And some big news today. Finally got some updates on one Jesse Puljujärvi. It appears, according to the Trib Seth Rohrbaugh, that he has signed a PTO with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. And I like this, to be honest. I think it's time to finally get a look at him in some game action. By all accounts, he's done okay in practice and workouts. He hasn't really blown anyone away or made any big impressions, but now it's time to take that natural next step. It's time to see what he can do in game action. So at this point, give him the PTO, send him down to Wilkes-Barre, see how he does. And with one of the injuries we have up over there on the rundown with Matt Nieto out 6 to 8 weeks, you're looking for some forward depth at this point.
Right. It's one thing, skate with the team during practices and morning skates and work out off the ice. Now it's time to see what you can do in games. And the team feels like he's not fully ready to play with the NHL squad. That's totally fine. You can go down, play a few games with Wilkes-Barre, see how your legs feel, see how your game is after so many months off. And let's face it, is Jesse Puljujärvi better than a lot of those players down in the AHL? Absolutely. I'll say that. He may make some of them look foolish when he's on the ice, but you still got to see what he can bring. And if he plays well, you can sign him to a PTO, not even a PTO with the Penguins. You can sign him to a contract with the Penguins, call him back up, and then see what he can do at the NHL level. Now, if he struggles a little bit, he's not finding his game, you can just release him from the PTO and he can go sign with another team. It's a win-win situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you look at his numbers from last year; they weren't overly horrible. Couple of goals, couple of assists, didn't play a ton. He was actually pretty solid in a bottom 6 role for the Carolina Hurricanes. The numbers don't jump out at you off the page for 17 games played with only 2 assists and 2 points. But if you watch the way he played the game, he was relentless on the forecheck. He helped create offense. He was a net positive on puck possession for Carolina. And that's the kind of team that Carolina is. That's what they do. That's what they base their system off of. So a guy like that could actually bring a nice physical-ish presence to the bottom six that could really spark some of the offense that you want to get from your Radim Zahornas, your Drew O'Connors, Lars Eller, a couple other guys down there. So I really want to see him maybe not dominate so much because he's coming off of major surgery. He's getting his legs back under him, but I would like him to look like one of, if not the best players on the ice when he's down in the AHL.
And he should be. And if he does, you can bring him back up to the Penguins, the NHL team that is, and he can be in the conversation for one of the full-time roster spots, whether that's an 11th forward, whether that's a 12th forward, or whether even if it's a 13th forward who can come in at times if a player is struggling that needs to be scratched, Puljujärvi can come in and vice versa, right? I think that's probably his ceiling here with the Penguins, considering their depth right now. Valtteri Pustin continues to play well. And with Matt Nieto out for the next couple of months, as we'll discuss in a little bit, there is a spot to be had right now, and Puljujärvi could potentially get it if he goes down, plays well with Wilkes-Barre, and then gets a contract from Kyle Dubas.
And like I said, this could be a big physical presence for the bottom six because Jesse Puljujärvi is not a small man and he does not play like it. He's 6'4", 201, and that is something that, like I don't want to go old school on here and say like, oh, the Penguins need to get tough. They got to get these big bruisers and everything. But if you look at the last few teams that have won the Stanley Cup, they had sandpaper to their game. The way I always refer to it is they had guys who got the crazy eyes. And the Penguins have always had that in their big guns. They've always had it with Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. Eventually those guys might see the red mist and come after you. But they need those kind of role players that they aren't just there to drop the gloves and fight, but they have some foot speed. They can play a physical game. They can be good on the forecheck. Basically, the best way I can put it, they can make it a long night when you play the Penguins again, where as soon as you see that puck going into your corner as an opposing defenseman, you think, oh my God, they're going to take a piece of me again. And the Penguins, when they won the Stanley Cup in 16 and 17, they had that. They were a relentless forechecking team, and they wore you down over the course of 60 plus minutes. And they've kind of been lacking that for the last few years.
And another thing you can add with him potentially, put him on the second power play unit and have him be one of the net front presences there, because it's, I think, going to take a lot for a opposing defender to get his big butt out of the way. It's kind of similar to how they can put Carter there and have him deflect pucks. You can put Puljujärvi there and he'll do that job, I think, perfectly fine. He's a big body. You can put him there. I think you can start seeing the second unit. Again, if he plays well in Wilkes-Barre and if he gets a contract from the Penguins, you can put him there. Even though the second unit doesn't get that much time, still, he might be able to get a goal or two when the second unit is out there. But, that's at least a little bit of wishful thinking right now. We just got to see how he plays to start.
Yeah. And then you look at his overlying career metrics. They're all pretty positive. He's got just over, when he's on the ice at 5-on-5 in his career, his team gets more than half of the shot attempts. So that's a huge thing. So he's not like a guy we talked about yesterday. He's not like Ryan Graves where he's big for nothing. He's doing something out there. So really want to see what he does in the AHL. Really want to see if this team is looking at maybe giving him a short-term contract going into the rest of the season, but we'll keep an eye on that as it develops. When we come back, we're going to talk about the recent surgery that Matt Nieto required, as well as give a quick couple takes on the All-Star nominations that we're going to find out tonight. But first, we have to tell you about our next sponsor, and that is FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League. We're back here on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. It's a Thursday edition, I'm Patrick Damp, one of your co-hosts, joined live to tape from the Garden in Boston, Massachusetts, dude, Hunter Hodes. And a couple quick things we got to hit here before
I'll drink
we
a
go
shot
get
every time you say it like that. We're starting shots every time you
the
say
Garden.
it. Yeah, there's another one. I'll have about 5,000 drinks tonight for you.
But yeah, so we got to get to a couple quick things here before we wrap this episode up. First and foremost, came out today from the team that Matt Nieto needed laparoscopic surgery on his right knee. The recovery time is expected to be 6 to 8 weeks, so that doesn't quite shut him down for the rest of the season, but it gets us to about the middle of March when we're really in the stretch run to the Stanley Cup playoffs. So that's a bit of a tough hit to the depth, because Matt Nieto, while he wasn't overly impressive, I do think he was playing a solid role in the bottom six.
He was one of their better penalty killers. I will give him that. Offensively, he really wasn't doing anything to help the team that much. Defensively, again, he's one of their better defensive forwards, but I think it's still a big hit to their penalty kill. Even though the PK is still top 10 in the league, they still miss his presence out there, to say the least. But this is still not good news. I mean, it's funny. He was skating about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Then he came off the ice, was doing off-ice work. I don't know what happened. I don't know if this was planned surgery, that is, or if he had a setback. But usually it's not the best sign where someone, it looks like, is skating, right? And then he comes off the ice to do off-ice work. I don't know. But that's just me speaking with my opinion. But
I mean, as far as I can tell, when it comes to injuries and surgery like that, it's one of those nagging ones where he's going to try it. He's going to do therapy and in massages and workouts and all that stuff you get from the physical training staff. And eventually they were probably like, you know what, let's knock this out now, get it out of the way, get it fixed, and we'll get you back at 100% rather than 85%.
That makes sense, at least. I mean, he'll still be back before the regular season ends in early to mid-April. The Penguins, they'll more than likely be in the race by that point, so he'll be able to help them for the stretch run. As you said, I'd rather get it out of the way now than have to deal with this early March, mid-March, where he has to miss the rest of the season, especially if they don't make the playoffs in April.
Yeah, and like you said, the biggest hit this takes for the depth is the penalty killing. He has been absolutely a dog on that PK, and it's been, like you said, it's still top 10. They're sitting at 10th right now, but the fact that we went from really worried about what the penalty killing unit was going to be after last year to this year it being a top 10 unit, he played a huge role in that. So very curious to see how the PK continues to fare without him out there. So we'll see him in about 6 to 8 weeks. Lastly, but not leastly, as I said at the top of the show in the first segment, tonight during the game, which you can catch at 7 o'clock on ESPN, the NHL is going to announce the first 32 All-Star selections for this year's All-Star game, which is in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Ever heard of it? And for the Penguins, for a season that's been up and down where they're kind of on the playoff bubble, off the top of my head, I can think of at least 3 guys who are deserving to go to the All-Star game.
I can give you 4, to be honest. Both goaltenders, I would say those 2. And I would go Sidney Crosby and Jake Guentzel. I would honestly go all 4 for those. If I had to guess who gets picked tonight, you probably have the same guess as I do. Sidney Crosby.
My guess, well,
in the league, but go ahead.
I was going to say my guess, I mean, for straight up marketing purposes, they're probably going to take Sid just because he's the big name. But I also look at it as Tristan Jarry is still the leader in shutouts in the NHL. And whether or not he's atop the league in save percentage, which he really isn't, but he's doing really well on goals saved above expected. When you lead the league in shutouts, it's kind of almost a shoe-in as an all-star, right?
Usually, yeah, and he's been to an all-star game before, so I wouldn't be surprised if he does get the selection tonight or if he gets selected a little bit down the line. That said, if I did have to guess who gets picked from the Penguins tonight, it's going to be Sidney Crosby, even outside of marketing purposes, which, that's a pretty big reason to bring Sidney Crosby. He's still one of the faces of the league. He's been one of the best players in the league this year, showing again why he's at least a top 5 player in the sport, why he should have serious consideration for the Hart Trophy. He's been everything and more to the Penguins this year. But if he's somehow also not selected, maybe he gets in later, Jake Gensel, I could also see potentially being one of the candidates that gets selected tonight. He's also been a rock for the Penguins this year. And I know Alex Nedeljkovic, he's only started in 12 games this year, but he's still been one of the best goaltenders in hockey. It's more of an outside chance for tonight at least, but I could still at least see it, even though it's maybe a 5 to 10% chance. I could see 4 players potentially getting it, though there's 1 or 2 that are above the other 2, in my opinion.
I think the lack of starts is going to work against Nedeljkovic. I agree with you. He's been pretty fantastic, but you start only 12 games. I don't think they're going to give you the nod. And then you hit the other one on the head that I was going to say, Jake Gensel. He's just been absolutely incredible. He's one of the best goal-scoring wingers in the National Hockey League. So, I mean, I do think there is a very real world where we're talking about the Penguins sending 3 representatives to the All-Star game this year.
And isn't that awesome? Even though this is a team that is middling this year, they're fighting for their playoff lives. They've still had quite a few players who have played some electric hockey this year. Heck, if Erik Karlsson had been playing at an even higher level, we'd be talking on him potentially for the All-Star game. Same with Chris Letang. And I think both of them have been very solid this year. But imagine if they had been playing at an even higher level, it would make the voters and even the fans, because there's going to be a fan vote, I believe, later on, just that much tougher to select.
Would look like the 1992 All-Star game when it was basically all Penguins in the starting
Right.
lineup. So, like we said, 7:00 tonight from Boston, the Penguins take on the Bruins on ESPN. You can catch it there. If you're somehow at the game, go give Hunter a high five, tell him what's up and that you love the show. But that is going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. We'll be back tomorrow in some capacity. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to do that episode as Hunter is traveling, but we will be back tomorrow in some capacity to recap the game and get you ready for this weekend's game against the Buffalo Sabres. But that'll do it for this one. For Hunter Hodes, I am Patrick Damp. Thank you for listening.